What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the CNC podcast. I'm CH.
And I'm Crimson. And today we're going to talk about medical mysteries. And by that, I mean when you think that you have it figured out, when science thinks that it has it figured out, all of a sudden a new condition or a new situation comes up and it all of a sudden throws a wrench in the gears. And just what you thought everything was explained, it is no longer true. And we're going to go ahead and start off talking about medical mysteries with CH. CH, what did you bring for us?
So the first thing that I want to talk about is this thing called the Dancing Plague. Now, this took place in 1518, and it was like a dance epidemic. It says that the Dancing Plague, or dance epidemic of 1518, was a case of dancing mania that occurred in Strasbourg, Alsace, which is modern-day France, in the Holy Roman Empire from July 1518 to September 1518. And somewhere between 50 and 400 people took to dancing for weeks. And there isn't really any like scientific cause for any of that. They never figured out why. So the theory is it was just stress-induced mass hysteria. So what happened was, and a lot of people ended up dying from it, was the outbreak began in July 15th, of 1518, when a woman called Frau Trophea began to dance fervently in a street in Strasbourg. Trophea kept up the constant dancing for a week, and soon 36 others joined in. By August, the dancing plague had claimed 400 victims. Dancers were beginning to collapse. It is said that some even died from a stroke or heart attack, and no one knew what caused this reaction, which meant no one understood how to remedy it. By early September, the outbreak began to subside, when the dancers were sent to a mountain shrine to pay for absolution. So, it seems like back in this time, they just started to dance. They just started to break it down until they died. And like I said, there isn't really any cause for it. The theory is, once again, it was just stress-induced mass hysteria. So I guess things were so bad at that time that they just needed to bust a move.
To boogie it out.
Yeah, and it killed a couple of people. So that was it's a pretty strange phenomenon, if you ask me. I mean, I can't imagine just dancing until I literally collapse.
It reminds me of like two situations. One, it's like not really related to it, but it just gives me the idea. It's like that Disney film. I don't know what it's called, but where they have all the lemmings basically run off the side of the cliff, trying to say that all the lemmings, had this suicide ritual where they just saw the ledge and they all fell off. That was later debunked because it was proven that Disney actually decided to go ahead and push all the lemmings off the edge and ended up making all the lemmings die. It wasn't some, mass hysteria where all the lemmings decided to just jump off the edge for no reason. But the second one, that even though it's from a movie as well, is in Forrest Gump, where Forrest is running across the country, and then people were like, "Hell yeah, brother," and just starts running with him. maybe people were like, "You know what? I just need to dance too."
I seen
the people saw it and was like, I need to dance as well. So everybody just started they got bit by the dancing bug.
I seen a funny thing the other day about Forrest Gump, where it said, because Jenny supposedly died of AIDS in the movie, and that was in a time when AIDS wasn't common, so they didn't know anything about it, and Jenny slept with Forrest. So I seen like something funny that it was talking about how like the reason that he just started running that day is because he felt the itch and he didn't know what to do, so he just ran until he pretty much outran AIDS. And that's why he just like stopped one day, because the itch was gone. But yeah, that was a pretty strange phenomena, and to the best of my knowledge, it only happened that one time in that one place. Some people chalked it up to demonic possession, and that's because this was during the time of the Holy Roman Empire. So, everything was all about crusades and religion. So yeah, it doesn't really surprise me they would chalk it up to demonic possession.
That's crazy to think about too, because it's just like there's no way that's real. But once again, this is like medical mysteries. Like this is like cases that were like proven, and we still can't describe it, and it sounds fake, but like you don't really need a reason for everything, man. Sometimes things just happen. Which, if you really like, probably 200 years in the future, where the technology is going to be proven why they did that, but still, I don't have a mass hysteria thing. I actually have kind of a modern story, and I just want to talk about this 56-year-old man who is undergoing a surgery known as kyphoplasty, and basically the man had a spinal injury, so he was getting the surgery to treat it, and how it's treated is by they inserting a balloon into the spine and inflating it to restore the height, and once the height is restored, the injured vertebra is then supported by injecting polymethylmethylate medical cement to add support to the vertebra as it heals. But almost a week later, the man started experiencing chest pain, and he also had problems breathing. The kyphoplasty is a procedure that has a complication chance of less than 20%. So the situation of in case anything happens is kind of like a phenomenon in itself. But what makes this case different is that the cement that was put into the spine ended up leaking through the bloodstream to where it eventually formed a cement embolism inside the right atrium of the heart. And embolism is just like something that's blocking the heart. And so in this case, it was cement from the medical procedure. And the thin cement piece ended up tearing through the heart and punctured the right lung. And the cement piece ended up being 4 inches long.
Dang.
So, yeah, so the man, I think it was like 10 centimeters in diameter or something like that. The man ended up getting a surgery to have that recovered. And as far as I know, he has had an almost full recovery about a month after the surgery. So hopefully he's doing perfectly fine today. But, imagine like, okay, 20% chance is real low. We don't got to worry about this. I already know that there's a chance that it could leak into my bloodstream, but I'm willing to take that opportunity because the spine, like, it supports you walking, jumping, playing hopscotch, mass hysteria, dancing. Like, the spine goes through a lot of different traumas. And so it's pretty important. And, next thing you know, it joined in your heart and pierced your lungs. So thankfully that happened in today's age, because in the 1500s, or really any other time before this age, that he would have been dead. He also would have had to have been exposed to getting cement in his heart during those times. So that probably wasn't really a thing.
Was cement even like this might be a really stupid question, but was cement even like a thing back then? Back in the 1500s, or were they still just throwing rocks and mud around?
Well, according to my database here, cement was invented, up until, or about 12 million years ago.
Oh, wow, okay.
When burnt limestone reacted with oil shale, the production of cement out of clay and limestone was initiated in France in 1813 by Louis Vissot, and in England in 1822 by James Frost. And that name was way easier to pronounce.
You know what? I that was a really dumbass question, because like they had castles and shit back then.
Yeah,
I'm a fucking idiot. Edit that out.
I guess in Yorkshire, England, I don't see the source of what this is saying, like what's telling me this, but in 1824, somebody took out a patent for a material that was produced from a synthetic mixture of limestone and clay. So I guess limestone and clay was when it really started going around. Portland cement was discovered in the 19th century. And fun fact, concrete is the most consumed substance in the world, second only to water, with producing about 10 billion tons of concrete each year.
When you say consumed, I think that the guy in your story took that a little too literally.
Yeah, he did. It did come out one way or another. So, imagine if he ended up pooping that out. Imagine if he didn't have a second surgery. Or, like, right before he pooped it out, that's where the little embolism formed. So it just, like, blocked him up. And he had, like, constipation because of it. Tune in next episode to where CH and I create a cement embolism and find out where it forms in our body.
You know, it probably will lead up to my next story here, which is spontaneous human combustion. Now, you got to take this one with a grain of salt, because some people say that this literally is not possible, and others say that there are cases of it, so take it with a grain of salt. So, spontaneous combustion is pretty much where you're just chilling out and you just explode. You just burst into flames. And in this case here, it says that there was an elderly man they found his remains, and it looked like he had been burned, but there were no accelerant, no evidence of any fire anywhere. So the coroner ruled it as he just burst into flames. And then there was the first case, supposedly. Like I said, as a matter of fact, take everything with a grain of salt in this podcast. Because there's not really any way to know what's real. We're just talking about things that we've researched and found and thought were interesting and wanted to share. So, the first case of spontaneous combustion on the record took place in Milan in the late 1400s, when a knight named Paulinus Vorstius allegedly burst into flames in front of his own parents. And as with many cases of spontaneous combustion, alcohol was at play, as Vorstius was said to have belched fire after consuming a few glasses of particularly strong wine. So he drank some alcohol and blew up. And additional combustion events would transpire over the next few hundred years, all the way from Pakistan to Florida. Experts couldn't explain the deaths any other way. So it seems like people are just blowing up, exploding, bursting into flames. And there's, like I said, not any way to prove that's what's happening. So either there's some weird scientific thing going on, or some supernatural shit and people are just blowing up. I don't know. I don't know if it's even real at all. Might not be. But a few possible explanations for this. Despite investigators' failures to successfully locate a different possible cause of death, the scientific community is not convinced that spontaneous human combustion is caused by anything internal or particularly spontaneous. First, the seemingly supernatural way that fire damage is typically limited to the victim and his or her immediate area in cases of alleged spontaneous combustion is not actually as unusual as it seems. Many fires are self-limiting and die out naturally upon running out of fuel. In this case, the fat in a human body. And because fires tend to burn upward as opposed to outward, the sight of a badly burned body in an otherwise untouched room isn't inexplicable. Fires often fail to move horizontally, especially with no wind or air currents to push them. So, as you could hear from this theory, it's using the fat in the body to burn, and since it can't get out, it blows you up. Like, it will make you explode for it to get out. And as fire burns a human body, subcutaneous fat melts and saturates the body's clothes. The continuous supply of fat to the wick keeps the fire burning at astonishingly high temperatures until there is nothing left to burn and the blaze extinguishes. The result is a pile of ashes, much like what is left in cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion. So whether or not any of that is real, has happened, or is possible, I guess we won't really know until we see it with our own eyes. I guess take a swig of alcohol and see what happens.
Theoretically, take a swig of alcohol and see what happens.
Yeah. If you're over the age of, if you're 21.
Yeah.
Or older.
21, 18. I love how our country is like the only country that has 21.
Yeah. Well, I think that like in other countries you could drink beer if you're like 18, but you can't drink liquor until you're 21. I could be wrong about that, though. That's something that somebody told me once.
There's some places where you could do it as young as 15, like with like stuff like wine. And yeah, so America just wants us to be as healthy as possible to be a possible war soldier.
Pretty much.
But that's a topic for another day. I just want to focus on something more exciting: magic mushrooms. No, I am not taking them right now. CH is also not on them, as far as I know. Uh, Unlike this 30-year-old man who decided to take magic mushrooms. He suffered from conditions like bipolar disorder and opioid dependence, and he was looking for ways to treat his conditions. He heard about uh, hallucinogens creating therapeutic effects like LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, hallucinogens kind of along those lines. Well, I guess hallucinogens in general. It could possibly help him. The way the psilocybin mushrooms were going to be taken was decided already, and the man was going to turn it into a tea. Once the tea was made, the man went ahead and he started injecting the tea into his body. But of course, he did this smart thing, and he filtered the tea with a cotton swab beforehand. So safety first. Instead of finding therapeutic relief, the man experienced nausea, started vomiting blood, had yellow skin, headaches, and basically a lot of bad signs about him injecting tea into his body, directly into his bloodstream. So this family actually found him and ended up bringing him to the ER, and doctors quickly went to work. The man experienced multiple organ failure, such as the liver and kidneys. His blood was contaminated with both a bacterial and fungal infection. Because he had that fungal infection from injecting the mushroom tea into his body, his blood actually started growing the mushrooms that he injected into himself. So he was a magic man for a little bit, but at what cost?
Yeah, he was getting high off his own supply for a little bit.
Yeah, he was. Mushrooms, were beginning to form in the bloodstream. The patient was placed on antifungal and antibacterial drugs, but he also experienced respiratory failure, so he was put under a ventilator as well. Thankfully, the man did end up recovering from the incident. But a couple fun facts is that in the interview of what happened, the man himself was actually not allowed to interview because he had an altered state of mind, if you could imagine why. And so he couldn't interview, as well as the family said that he stopped taking his meds. So my personal theory is that, oh man, my meds don't work, I'm going to stop taking them. And maybe because he was bipolar and had a couple other conditions as well, it just made sense for him to put it into his body directly instead of ingesting it orally like most people do. So hopefully he learned his lesson. Hopefully he's doing better today. And hopefully he does not put anything foreign into his body that he's not supposed to. So don't do drugs. Don't inject mushrooms into your bodies, or they will start growing in your bloodstream. That's like the modern. That could be the new. Don't eat a watermelon seed, or it'll grow in your stomach. Also, with the spontaneous combustion, I don't know enough about the body. I'm not a doctor or scientist or anything, but I'm not opposed to it. I can see it happening, and in a way, wear like our own candle. But what I want to know is, here's a Spotify question of the day, of the week. What flavor scented candle would you be? I think if I was to spontaneously combust right now, my scent would be cheeseburgers and tears. I don't know if you want to buy that candle, but that's what scent I would be. CH, what do you think you would smell like if you spontaneously combusted?
I don't know. Probably shit.
Yeah, I hope so.
I'm not sure. I mean, I imagine that a body blowing up wouldn't smell too good.
Oh man, it'd be horrible. All like the burnt hair. It might smell like bacon for a little bit, and tears if you're around me.
Speaking of fire, what happens when you get close to fire? You get hot. What happens when you get hot? Why don't you answer that?
You explode?
No.
No. I know
You start to sweat. And that leads me to our next topic, the sweating sickness. Now, the sweating sickness is a strange one because, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure that this is the sickness that only infected like rich and noblemen. Like if you were of an upper class, type of community, then you were most likely going to get this. Now, the sweating sickness, also known as the sweats, English sweating sickness, English sweat, or sudor anglicus in Latin, was a mysterious and contagious disease that struck England and later continental Europe in a series of epidemics beginning in 1485. The last outbreak occurred in 1551, after which the disease apparently vanished. The onset of symptoms was sudden, with death occurring often within hours. Sweating sickness epidemics were unique compared with other diseases and outbreaks of the time, whereas other epidemics were typically urban and long-lasting. Cases of sweating sickness spiked and receded very quickly and heavily affected rural populations. Its cause remains unknown, although it has been suggested that an unknown species of hantavirus was responsible. So the signs and the symptoms of this disease, which, like I said, to the best of my knowledge, commonly infected like rich people. It might be a different thing that I'm thinking of, but I'm pretty sure it's the sweating sickness. So what would happen is you would get cold shivers, for sometimes very violent, dizziness, headache, severe pains in the neck, shoulders, and limbs. You'd be exhausted. It's like a really bad cold. Like you get a headache, you're delirious, you got heart palpitations, all kinds of, like, just nothing good. Like you're laying there, you're cold, you're sweating, you're dying, and you feel like you're dying. So the disease tended to occur in summer and early autumn. Now, like I said, lucky for us, it seems that this disease died out in 1551. So let's hope it don't come back, because that sounds horrible.
That sounds pretty horrible.
Well, lucky for us, we're not, like noblemen, so it probably wouldn't affect us anyway.
We might not be noblemen, but there's a possibility, well, not me, because I'm pretty sure I'm not, but there's a possibility that you, or the people listening to this, could be the result of a human chimera. And basically, from a wiki definition, leading us into our next topic, a human with a subset of cells that is distinct genotype than other cells that is having genetic chimerism. And what that means is that basically you and I have a set code of DNA, right? But so some people, and even animals as well, tortoiseshell cats, the males are a good example of this, could end up harboring a second set of DNA inside of them, genotype genetics. So even though you might not display it, you could be harboring a second set of cells inside of you, which is pretty terrifying, if I'm not going to lie, because it's basically like it's not you, it's a foreign thing. And fun fact, by the way, people that have the human chimerism trait, they could end up having like autoimmune disorders and stuff growing up later in life. It could be the result of forming some cancers, because since it is a foreign type to your body, eventually over time your body can get confused of which one is like actually you, which one is that, what's the enemy, what's good, and could end up making it attack itself and end up making you sicker. So there's kind of a downside to the chimerism. What's crazy about it is there's only about 100 recorded cases in modern medical literature, but there is a scientific theory that could show that chimerism isn't really as like rare or uncommon as we think it is. There's actually a theory that 10% of the population is a result of the chimerism, but really there is no physical or genetic distinction that would make a person want to go get tested. And most people that are diagnosed with chimerism end up having it accidentally, most people that are diagnosed with chimerism end up finding out accidentally through another means, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But there's two different types that I really want to talk about that make them different and what kind that you have. And there's the twin chimerism, and that's when a pair of twins is conceived So both of them are starting to grow in the womb, but one of them sadly passed away in the womb. So the surviving fetus starts absorbing the cells of the deceased fetus, and instead of merging it together, it actually absorbs that different set of cells. And another fun fact I learned, 1/8 of the population is actually just the individual person in the womb. 1/8 of the population ended up starting off as twins in the womb. So personally, I don't know if I have been. I've never heard of it, but I do have a friend who did tell me that he did absorb the fetus in the womb. So,
Dang.
and it makes you wonder how many people don't know about it either. Especially because it's 1/8 of the population. Like, that's crazy. So, like, even though it's 1/8, there's a chance that you or I could have, had a twin in the womb that we don't know about. Or maybe our parents are shunned about the fact that we absorbed another person inside of them, so they keep it hidden away from us to die with that secret.
It's pretty disturbing that like stuff like that's even possible.
Yeah, not to mention, so that was just the twin chimerism. Um, but there's also the, excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, tetragometic chimerism, and that's when two different sperm cells fertilize two different egg cells. When a sperm fertilizes the egg cell, it creates a zygote. So I might say zygote here or there. So just so you're aware what a zygote is, it's a fertilized egg cell. And that's when the two different zygotes end up fusing together into one human embryo that ends up having crossed cell lines. I also want to give a thanks to healthline.com for the definitions of the twin and tetragometic chimerism. A good example of this is Lydia Fairchild was a woman who wanted custody of her kids. I actually was listening to a podcast about this today. It's kind of crazy. But Lydia wanted custody of her kids, and for that to happen, she had to do a DNA test to prove that she was actually the mother of the kids. Keep in mind that the husband said, hey, yeah, I know this is the mother of the kids. I was there when I helped conceive them, or I helped them, be created. I helped her through her pregnancy. I was there when she gave birth. I know that she is the mother of my kids. And the reason why he had said that is because after the DNA test, Lydia ended up proving negative. So the court ended up believing that Lydia was a fraud, and those weren't actually her kids. So there's issues of kidnapping, and because it's the government, they're more concerned about welfare fraud. So they had her do she had 4 kids in total. I think she was pregnant with her 3rd kid at the time. And so her first kid that they did the test on, she ended up being -4. So they tried it on the 2nd kid, and ended up being -4. And so everybody's freaking out, what's going on? I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense. And the court's okay, well, in the meantime, you can't stay with the mom, or you can't stay with Lydia because we don't know if Lydia's actually your mom. So far, our tests prove otherwise. And so Fairchild started freaking out. She's like, what's wrong? I don't understand what's going on. And she was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I could be mixing up the pregnant with the 3rd child with a different person. But nonetheless, the court decided, okay, well, let's have this 3rd-party person be there to make sure that nothing freaky goes on while we get this extra DNA test to make sure that it's not contaminated or messed with in any way. They end up doing the DNA test, and it comes back negative again. Everybody's like, why is it negative? We were there. This obviously is not tampered, but everybody says she gave birth to the kids. So they end up looking at her, and through different other sources of kind of early recorded theories of it, they're like, could she be Chimera? And what happened was Fairchild was actually the tetragometic Chimera, in the sense of that she was one of 2 zygotes inside of the womb, and she ended up absorbing the other. And so when the person was watching the DNA sampling to make sure no funny business was going on, and the test still came back negative, it turns out that Lydia's cervix had cells from the twin that Lydia absorbed. And since the kids absorbed the cells and basically took on the absorbed twins trait, who was female in the womb, uh, it more or less made Lydia her kid's aunt instead of the actual mother.
That's
Um,
crazy.
so basically, a fetus who wasn't even outside in the real world at all ended up having kids because Lydia carried the genetic code for that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Lydia's not the mother at all. Um, there's cases where, or there's situations where, even though the cervix says, hey, you know what, the absorbed twin is actually the mom, but there's these different traits that we found through different tests, and they match the genetic code saying this is Lydia. So, and we actually found some of Lydia's traits inside of those kids. So, in some parts of the kids, Lydia is actually the mom, and in some parts of the kids, in terms of like birthing especially, Lydia is the aunt.
That's wild.
Yeah, it kind of messed me up because it's like, do we still call you mom? Do we call you half mom?
I don't know. Imagine like how messed up that'd be for like the kids too, because it's like
I know.
your mom isn't even really your mom; it's your aunt, and your mom never existed.
Yeah, and there was even another case too where I couldn't really, I don't remember, I couldn't really find out if it was either, uh, there's cases too where, like, if a pregnant woman was either died shortly after giving birth or died within a month of giving birth, that there was still fetal cells from the baby inside of that woman still. So, in the sense of being a temporary chimera, um, so that was a little off topic, but there was a woman who I couldn't remember if she was either like absorbed twin in the fetus, or if she recently gave birth and still had some of those cells, but she ended up having a liver that was destroyed and missing chunks and stuff because she had hepatitis C and she was actually dying from it. And over time, the little fetal cells that were a part of her, or the genetic code of the twin that she absorbed, ended up replacing her liver completely, making a brand new liver that you could argue wasn't even her liver anymore because she didn't grow it. So in a way, her being a chimera saved her life.
That's like some Wolverine shit.
Yeah, it is. Wolverine, but we're injecting 30 people inside of you. And also, you probably heard about like artificial, and I don't really know the word for it, but basically where artificial insemination, you take an egg from the woman, you take the sperm from the man, and in a lab setting, you do the impregnation. And you grow it inside the cell, and then like eventually you get the surrogate. Well, when you do multiple batches of it, and you kind of just throw them all in one situation and kind of just fertilize them all together, there's no evidence proving that that could increase the chances of chimerism.
You know,
So-
it's funny that you mentioned that, and I don't know for sure, so I don't want to say, but I am like 85% sure that there's actually somebody in my family who was born that way, but I don't know for sure.
That'd be pretty wild. The only evidence I know about it is from Futurama, where Professor Farnsworth grew his clone through a test tube, and his nose looks
I
like
don't
a
know about the
polygon
test tube.
tossed
I
in
don't,
motion.
I don't know about the test tube stuff, but
Oh, not a test tube, because like, well, they originally start growing it in the tube, I think, to like get the environment right, and then they transfer it to like a plate or something. So it's real weird. I watched like in sophomore year, we watched a thing in Human Growth and Development about it. So, but yeah, it doesn't increase the chances of chimerism. No evidence out there at all, so you don't have to worry about that. But there's also people that, or I'm sorry, I guess I worded that wrong. My brain kind of went off somewhere else. You could actually transfer some chimerism traits if you're the parent onto your kid. So they did a study about a bunch of women who died around the same age, about 7 years old, and who had some chimera trait-like qualities. So after they died, they did some studies on them, and they found basically that even though the woman presented female, they still had, the XY chromosomes. Even though it was physically a female, they still had the Y chromosomes inside instead of the XX chromosomes. So, for cases like that, where you could have both the XX and the XY, I guess I worded that wrong in the beginning. I'm sorry. You have both the XX and the XY chromosome, and they found those in those women that they did the studies on. And if you have, let's say you're the mom, and you have the XXXY, and you have a kid with your, the father of the children, and he has just the XY, you could actually pass both the XX, XY, and XY onto the kids. So your kids could have 3 sets of genetic code instead of the 2 sets of genetic code.
Wow.
And there's people out there that are chimera, but it's really prevalent. It's very obvious to see that usually it's split right down the middle, where one will be a brunette on one half, the other will be blonde. You mostly see it, I don't remember what the term is, but somebody who has like a blue eye and a brown eye, or different colored eyes. That's a result of chimerism.
Oh, yeah, I actually I don't remember the word for it either, but I know what you're talking about.
It starts with an H, and it kills me that I don't remember, but I thought about it when we were just about to start recording. But different colored hair, different colored skin, different colored eyes. So there's a lot of physical traits, the phenotypes that are adjusted as well, but it really depends on the person to person, and obviously how severe.
It's called heterochromia.
Heterochromia. I kept thinking heterochromia. That makes sense. But yeah, so I just think it's pretty wild. And when I was in research, I was like, man, it'd be really cool to be a chimera. But at the same time, it would suck because, like I mentioned in the beginning, how it can be in the causes of some like cancers. And I have a theory. I didn't really look into that part because I thought about it right before we recorded. But if it could help induce mental disorders as well, like bipolar or stuff like that, because over time people found that, well, even though this organ doesn't belong to you, or you had that fetus that was in you recently, some of the cells could actually migrate to your brain and live with parts of your brain as well. So
the only thing I know a chimera, whatever it is from, is they had a card of it on Dead Man's Cross. And that's like the first time I've ever heard of anything like that.
Yeah, it was
a 4-star card. It wasn't even a good one.
Yeah, it's from mythological creature all the way back from the Greek era, and it was basically a fire-breathing hybrid of like a lion, a goat, and a snake. And so since it was like all these 3 things combined into one species, we just kind of kept the term and passed it on to humans. And like I said, male tortoiseshell cats, they have different genetic codes because normally most tortoiseshell cats are female. So very, very rare that you get that male. It's also crazy too because even sex organs could happen. There was a baby born in the 1950s or the 1960s who presented female, but when they went to look at her, she had half of a uterus, or she had 1 uterus and 1 testicle. So, and in situations like that, I don't know if it happened with the baby, but it can cause infertility as well. So you can either produce or you can't produce depending on the severity and how it affects you. But I just was like, it's a super brand new term that we started like really discovering about, and there's so many people out there that are chimera and don't know, or they just don't tell anybody. Like I said, I don't think I am one just because I don't have really anything distinct. You could even notice it in like your hair texture, how some of it would be curly and then all of a sudden it's just straight. I've never heard anything about absorbing a twin in the womb. I unfortunately cannot get pregnant, so I did not absorb or any like fetal cells that were left over. So yeah, I personally don't think I'm a chimera, and I'm kind of glad I'm not. But for like bragging rights, as like a cool party trick, I do wish I had two different colored eyes. I wish I had blue eyes, because people that have blue eyes and brown hair, I think they're like, I think that's the most fucking gorgeous thing you could have, honestly. That's about everything I have to bring to this episode. I thought these were really cool. I had a lot of fun writing these, especially the Chimera. I didn't really know a lot about it. I obviously knew of the creature, but learning about the medical things as well. I didn't even breach the surface. I can't even say I breached the surface. I would definitely look into it in your own free time. It was really confusing. It took me a lot of studying to figure out how to word it and really how all of it kind of blended together. Just because there's a lot of big science words in the beginning. But yeah, I think the Chimera part is the craziest because, you know, how many people don't think they're one, and how a woman almost lost her kids because the justice system or the court system relied so heavily on, the genetic test. And, science proved that you can't really always rely on that. So,
Well, that was all we had for this week's episode. This has been Medical Mysteries. As always, I'm CH.
and I'm Crimson.
And thank you guys for watching the CNC After Dark podcast. We will see you next week.
Bye.